Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. I'm super excited to be here today to bring you guys a user requested video. I always listen to your guys' feedback, and a lot of you guys really enjoyed the Laravel Echo WebSockets tutorial that we did a while back. We learned everything about setting up Laravel Echo to use WebSockets for real-time updates in our applications. In that tutorial, we used Pusher, a software as a service platform that allows us to incorporate WebSockets really easily by just creating an account and adding it to our application configuration. Okay, so that was basically what we did in that tutorial, and a lot of you guys really enjoyed that tutorial. It was a big success, but I got a ton of feedback that you guys wanted to know how you could incorporate WebSockets without needing to sign up for Pusher, how you could self-host your own WebSockets server. And I totally understand the need or desire for this. And so today I'm going to show you guys how to do exactly that. Now this is going to allow us to host our very own WebSockets server. Now this is important because this means that you can actually operate and use WebSockets without needing to sign up for an external service. There's still value in signing up for these monitored and managed services like Pusher, but for many of you guys, you may want to manage that yourself, and you can do that thanks to this package, Laravel WebSockets. We're going to be able to host our own socket server, complete with its own dashboard, and that's what I love about this package. This allows us to have our own dashboard that gives us real-time analytics, real-time feedback about events that are going through our server. We can use this dashboard for debugging, and it even allows us to send event payloads directly from the dashboard. So it's a really cool service. Now, in addition, this is also runs through PHP, which is really, really cool. It actually runs inside of a Laravel application. So if you're familiar with Laravel, you're instantly familiar with working with this server because it runs right inside our Laravel application. We can host it along with our application, so they're just together, or you could even host them separately so you have it running elsewhere, but it's running inside of a Laravel application, which is really convenient if you're familiar with the framework already. Okay, so there's a lot to love about this. I'm going to show you guys how to get it set up, and then we'll run through some demonstrations just to kind of prove that it works and how to configure Laravel Echo to work with our new socket server. All right, now welcome back. Hopefully you guys are excited to jump into this today. Now I am going to warn you, we're going to go a little faster than we normally go, just because I'm assuming at this point, if you're trying to run your own Laravel WebSocket server, that you already understand Laravel Echo and WebSockets. So I'm not going to go in and explain all of those details. If you do get lost or confused at any point, I am going to link in the description my previous series about Laravel Echo and WebSockets, and that talks about, it goes into full detail about how to get started with Laravel Echo, how to use it. It's like a 4 or 5 video long series, and it's about an hour long total, but if you watch the whole thing front to back. So it goes into a lot of good detail and gets you up and running if you get lost anywhere along the way. So just wanted to mention that that's available. If you feel like it's overwhelming, I'm going too fast, you can go down there and watch it, and I go a lot slower and explain all of the steps along the way so it makes sense. All right, now this is the project we're going to be working with is Laravel WebSockets, okay? And this is a battle-tested application. I'm going to talk more about some of the performance at the end. But let's go ahead and just get started setting this up. I'm going to start by showing you how to set up the server. Then we're going to go through, we're going to show how to configure your Laravel application to talk to your new server on the PHP end. And then we're going to talk about, in the third section, we are going to set up Laravel Echo on the client side and talk about how to connect to your new server. Okay, so there's kind of 3 steps. So let's start by just setting up the server so it's running and allowing us to connect to it. So here's the main project. We're going to go ahead and click Getting Started. You can come to the installation on the side, and these are the steps you need to get started. So we're going to go through this really quick. Now the first thing we need to do is create a new Laravel project. So you can see here in the terminal, I'm going to create a brand new one. We're going to call this project WebSockets, Laravel new WebSockets. But remember that you can incorporate this into an existing application. It just uses Composer and it brings it in like a package. So if you have an existing application, you can add this to it. In fact, if you have an existing application that uses Pusher, this is going to transition almost immediately because this application, this package actually replicates the Pusher API. So we're going to be using the Pusher package for both JavaScript and the PHP package to talk to our new server because this server replicates the Pusher API. So it looks like Pusher, other than the fact that it's not Pusher's servers, it's our server. But all of the plugins and packages that work with Pusher are going to work with your brand new server once we get this set up, because it uses that Pusher API. So that makes it even easier to work with, because those packages and plugins are available on lots of different platforms, not just Laravel. So you could start using this on mobile devices, TVs, anything. That's how awesome this server is going to be once we get going. Okay, so we went ahead, we got our package created. Let's obviously just CD into it, and then we're going to add the composer package that it says up here at the top. So just composer require, let's bring that project in. Nothing new or exciting here. There we go. We got our package brought in. This is going to bring in all the code necessary to run our Laravel WebSockets server. So the next step is there are a couple migrations we need to run, and we need to create our configuration file. And those are going to be, you're going to want to probably just go to this page. I'll link it in the description. And the first line here under this installation guide is going to provide us our migration. So we're going to go ahead and just copy that over, paste it into our terminal. That's going to create the configuration file, or sorry, the migration file. And then I'm just going to come down to this next line and set up the configuration file. So this next long one will produce the configuration file. I skipped over migrate because I haven't set up my database yet. Okay, and that's basically all you need to get started. So now that we got that running, let's go ahead and jump into the text editor and start configuring this. All right, so now that we're inside of our text editor, you can see we created two new files. We've got our configuration file under config WebSockets, and we've got our database migration over here as well. If we look at the migration, you can see we create a new table called website or WebSockets statistics entries. This is what stores the statistics for our WebSocket. So it's going to store a history of how many people were connected, the number of connections, the number of WebSocket messages that were sent out, and the number of API messages that were received in. So it's going to keep track of all of that. And the default is for 60 days. I will cover this in the next video into if you want to customize this server and how to set it up. But we're just going to leave everything for default for right now. Now that we got that up, before I run the migration to create these, I do just need to set some stuff up in my env file real quick personally. So we're going to set up, I've created a database called WebSockets, and I'm just going to set those up here. And that's all I need. Now I can connect to my database, run the migrations. Let's also make sure we have a couple other things running. You're going to want to use set your app name, because this project does grab the app name to kind of distinguish between multiple projects if you're working in a multi-tenancy solution. And then also your app URL. Now normally this works. You can see the default here is localhost. If you're running on Laravel Valet, this project will still work fine if you leave it like this. However, your analytics and statistics don't work unless you actually put the URL that Laravel Valet uses. So I'm going to be using Laravel Valet just to kind of play around with the project. So I'm going to put in the URL for my the Valet URL, which is websockets.test, because this is the WebSockets, and I use test as my TLD. Just put this in here so that the analytics show up. If you put localhost, it works fine, but you just don't get analytics because of the way the localhost DNS is resolved. Okay, so once you get that set, let's move on down to broadcast driver. Now the question is here, we've got our new Laravel server, our WebSocket server, what driver do we use? Well, one of the cool things about this is it uses and emulates the Pusher API, so we can use all of the Pusher drivers. So we're just gonna tell it we're using Pusher. Even though we're not using Pusher, we're using our own system where it uses the Pusher API, the Pusher packages, all that stuff, so we can just say Pusher is our driver here, and everything's gonna work out of the box. If we come down here also, you can see we've got our Pusher app ID, the key, the secret, and the cluster. And this is also going to be important because in order to work with our application, we need to have an ID, a key, and a secret. So this is where we're going to define those, and it's going to be used throughout our application. So you might wonder, well, where do I get these? You just make them up, basically. Now, in a production application, you would want to do something a little more secure than what I'm doing right now, but I'm just gonna make a couple things up for right now. The point is, it can be anything you want as long as you're consistent across using it. And I'll figure it out. I'm just gonna go ahead and just make up a key, make up a secret, and everything like that. We don't actually use cluster, so it's not a big deal. And that's everything that we need. Now we will be using these variables as well once we set up Echo on the client side. But of course, as long as you're keeping it consistent, it won't matter. All right, so now that we got those env things set up, we can go ahead and run our migrations, and then we'll configure our server. So let's just come over here, run that migration, and we should be good to go. So we now created our new database tables here, and now we can configure WebSockets through the configuration file. Okay, now the first thing we see up here at the top is apps. Now, one of the great things about this package is you can actually create it has multi-tenancy built out of the box. What this means is that you can actually have multiple Laravel applications or even just multiple projects in general. They don't have to be Laravel, but you can have multiple projects running on a single server. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set up our app ID, our app name, key, and secret, and all of this is coming from our env file. So we can just ignore this. And again, these are arbitrary pieces of information, and make sure when you go to production you set up something better than what I just set up here in our example. You're gonna want like a 60 character alphanumeric string that's hard to guess. But these are what we're defining here. And then when we set up pusher through our PHP side, we'll use the app or the app key and app secret to connect to our Laravel server. And when we set up Echo on the client side, we'll also use the same key to connect with it. And that is how this project will basically validate us, is with these keys and these secrets. So they can be anything, but you're going to need to be consistent with them because that's how you're going to validate those users. All right, so that's everything we need for these first few elements. Down here, you'll see that you can enable client messages, set it true or false. It's off by default, and then statistics. Now, the statistics are easy enough. If you don't want statistics, you set it to false. By default, you'll be tracking and logging your statistics. This is going to store records in the database of how many people were connected, how many messages were coming in through the API, and then how many WebSocket messages were sent as well. Okay, so that's what it's going to be tracking. And it stores that in the database with the migrations we just created. Now, what are these client messages? These are direct, basically peer-to-peer client messages. Two clients can actually send messages to each other without going through the server. Now, this is kind of a sketchy world if you're not careful. You're allowing people to basically interact with each other's computers through this portal that you're creating. So be really careful about turning this on. I wouldn't turn this on unless you know what you're doing and you're willing to create some security around it. Okay, so it's off by default, and that's for good reason. But the functionality is there, and that's a cool feature to have. We're going to talk about some of these other features in the next video if you're interested. We're going to finish all the stuff up in this video, but if you do want to continue on to the next video, I'm going to talk about how to configure some of these additional settings if you're confused about what these various settings do. We'll talk about that in the next video. I'm going to keep that one to 5 to 8 minutes and just cover customizing your server. But really, with that set up, that's all you need to do. If you have multiple apps, of course, just copy this here and you can create multiple applications. But we're just going to work with one right now. And that's it. You're ready to start running your WebSocket server. And that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to jump over to the terminal now. And I'm going to go ahead and just launch our server. So the way we launch it is inside of our project here. We're just going to run PHP artisan WebSockets serve. And that is going to go ahead and start our WebSocket server. So now it is running localhost. We have a WebSocket server that we're running ourselves. This is really, really cool stuff. We're going to go over to the browser, and I'm actually going to head over to our project. So if you go to websockets.test, of course, this is if you're using Laravel Valet, of course. Otherwise, just do whatever else you would, PHP artisan serve, go there, do whatever. But I'm using Valet. So we go to websockets.test, and we have our normal project here. But we can go to our socket server dashboard by default you go to /laravel-websockets. And if we go there, this is actually that dashboard I showed you earlier. And this is basically how you interact with your server. You can see if you have multiple apps, they'll show up here. We just have the one app that we created called Laravel. And then we've got the port 6001, which is the default port. And if we click connect, we can take a look at what's happening on this server with this application. So we have real-time statistics up here. We can create events here manually, and we can see a history of all the events that have happened here. Now you might wonder where all these events are. These are actually, because we're connecting to the real-time dashboard, we actually use WebSockets from our very own server to run our dashboard. That's what these are. So we have private WebSockets dashboard statistics, the API messages, and the subscribers are all located here. So there's 3 channels being used right now, and that's how we get those real-time data. Okay, so you can see here we already have some people, well, it's ourselves, but you see a subscriber, you see someone occupied. This is basically like a presence indicator, and we've got that for each of these 3 channels. Okay, so this is a really cool start. We have WebSockets. We're ready to go. You guys have a WebSocket server. You could literally launch this by just deploying your Laravel application, and your WebSocket server will deploy with it. Now you do need to run this command, this PHP artisan WebSocket serve, but if you connect that to supervisor, you can make sure that it runs constantly so you always have your socket server up and running. Okay? So that's it. That's all it takes to run your socket server. Now let's go ahead and talk about the next 2 parts, which the next thing is we need to go to our server side and configure Laravel to be able to send messages to our new server. So when we trigger like an event and we broadcast that event, we want to send it to our server, not to Pusher or anything else. We want to send it to this server. So let's go ahead and do that now. So this is kind of the PHP side of that. So the way that we do that is we are going to need a package, and we're going to be bringing in the Pusher PHP package. So we'll come over here to the terminal. I'm just going to open up a new tab. Well, we'll just close this for now, actually. We'll close our WebSocket server, and we are going to bring in a new package. So we'll use Composer, and we're going to say Composer require Pusher/Pusher PHP server. Same thing you would pull in if you wanted to work with Pusher itself. Remember, our project emulates Pusher's API. That's why we're using this package, is because our server has the same API as Pusher's server. Okay, so we can use the Pusher package, so it's pretty cool. All right, so we went ahead and brought that in, and that's really all we need to do for that. Now we can go ahead and configure it, and you would configure it just like you normally would if you're working with Pusher. You'd come into broadcasting here. You would set your broadcast driver to Pusher. We already have this set up in the env file, so that's okay. And then you come down here to your connections. You'll take a look at your Pusher connection, and we'll set up this information here. Now, most of this can actually stay the same as how Pusher uses it. We're going to pull the app key from our env file. Again, that's going to allow us to authenticate. Same with the secret. Again, that allows us to authenticate with our server, and the app ID. All that's the same, right? There are a few additional options we do need to do. The first one is going to be, and the biggest reason we need to add this is because by default, we're using the Pusher driver. So we're using that Pusher API, and it assumes that we're also trying to access Pusher's website. So in this case, we have our own website, not Pusher's website, but it has the Pusher API on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, yeah, use Pusher, but you need to use this host, which is basically the URL for our website, for our not our website, but our socket server, instead of using Pushers. So instead of going to like pusher.io or whatever, we're going to go to our own server, which is localhost in this case. So I'm going to do 127.0.0.1, which is localhost, so that I can use this locally. And then the other thing we need to tell it is the port to use. And in our case, the default port is 6001. You can configure that when you launch your server. The last thing we want to tell it to do is to use a scheme HTTP. All right, and that's it. That's all we need to do. And now our PHP side should be working and be able to send messages to our new server. Okay, so it's going to use the Pusher API, but it's going to use the host of localhost on port 6001 in order to connect to it, and then it'll use the Pusher API inside of there, and that's going to allow us to work with our server. Now, if you are using SSL, we'll talk about that in the next video if you're interested in SSL, but in that case, you are going to want to set HTTPS, and you're going to want to set encrypted to true. But because we're not using HTTPS right now, turn scheme just to normal HTTP, and you're going to want to comment out encrypted, okay? So we're going to comment that out, but just bring it back if you have SSL on. And that's it. So now we're good to go. So let's go ahead and test it. Let's create an event, and let's broadcast that event and see if it shows up on our server. So to do that, back over on the terminal, we're going to create a new event, PHP artisan make event, and we'll just call this event new message. We're just going to send a message. Easy stuff. All right, we got a new event. If we come up here to our app, events, new message, we have a standard event created here. We're going to make sure we broadcast this event. So implements should broadcast. And again, if this is confusing to you, go back, go into the description, and watch my Laravel Echo WebSockets tutorial. It goes into a lot more detail on this. Okay, let's go ahead and set up. We're just going to accept a message. and we're going to publish that to message as a public property. All right, so that should be good. And then for the channel name, you can be anything, of course, but we're gonna just call it home. Okay, and that's it. So we should be good to go now. We are able to broadcast our message. It's going to broadcast it to our pusher channel, which is gonna go to our new WebSockets server. Okay, so let's go ahead and just shut that down, and I'm gonna come over to our browser. Let's make sure we're running our server first, because we're gonna test this now. PHP artisan WebSockets serve. Should boot it back up. Just gonna refresh this page and connect. And there we go. Okay, so we're getting some analytics from before, and it looks like it's working. Okay, so our WebSockets server is up and running. This is great. Now let's go through and test it. We're gonna go back to the terminal, and I'm gonna just open up a new window here, and we're gonna use PHP artisan tinker. Okay, so make sure you're gonna want to do PHP artisan tinker. I just had that aliased, so you're gonna want to use that. And we're just gonna go ahead and trigger a new event. So we just created this new event called app events new message, and it accepts a message. So we're just gonna say hello world, and go ahead and trigger the event, okay? And you saw as soon as I sent that, I might do it again here, you'll see the event come in here. So we have this new API message, which was our event from app events new message, and it triggered on our server. I'm gonna run it just one more time so you can see it. So I'm gonna click up and run, and you can see that it popped up here, okay? So we are getting these messages. They're going to our server. It's accepting it and everything. So that means the PHP side is working. All of our events are triggering to our new WebSockets server. Now, the only problem is no one's connected to our server. We need some client side, some clients connected to our WebSockets so we can propagate these messages down to all of our clients. So let's go ahead and do the third part, which is setting up those clients now. Okay, so now to do that, we're actually going to be using the Laravel Echo JavaScript library. So let's go ahead and exit our Tinker. And just like before, we're going to need to bring this in with npm install. Let's do an npm install real quick because I haven't done that yet. Okay, so I just did a standard npm install. I hadn't ran that yet, so I wanted to make sure we had everything. And now that we got that, we're going to go ahead and also install two packages. Now the first one is Laravel Echo. So let's go ahead and install that. And then while we're at it, we also want to install pusher.js. Okay, so just as before, we're connecting to our own server, but it has the pusher API. So we're going to use the pusher JavaScript library to interact with our server. So that's why we have pusher.js in here, okay? And then Laravel Echo, just because we're using Echo. All right, let's bring both of those projects in. All right, so we should be good to go now. If we go back to our project, we can go ahead and actually configure this. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just go into our resources, into our JavaScript file, and into our app.js and configure Laravel Echo inside of here. So actually, we need to go to Bootstrap, I'm sorry. So the Bootstrap file. We are going to include app.js, and normally it is an app.js, but it's currently being brought in from Bootstrap. So we'll bring it in here. Okay, so then while we're in here, you can go ahead and kill jQuery. You don't need that right now. You really don't need any of these, but the I think it does use Axios actually, so you might need that. Anyway, we're gonna uncomment out this section down here to bring in Echo. You can see we import Echo from the Laravel Echo package we just brought in, and we import Pusher from the Pusher.js package that we just brought in. And then down here we can configure our Echo instance so that it's available on all of our pages through this global. Now, just like before, most of this we can keep the same because it mimics Pusher. So we're going to use the Pusher broadcaster. For the key, we're going to go ahead and get that key from our env file. So let's use the Laravel mix, the Laravel mixes env file. And then the cluster, again, doesn't matter. We're not using encrypted, so let's go ahead and just comment that out. And then the last two things we need to add is our port and our host, just like before. Since that's different than the normal pusher, we need to define those two elements. Now what we do is we don't actually use host in here, we use WS host, okay? And for WS host, we're just gonna go ahead and set up, we can actually automate this by just doing window.location.hostname. And then the other one we wanna do is the port. So we're gonna do WS port, and we're just gonna set it to eval 6001. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Now Laravel Echo is basically set up. Now, in order to use this, of course, we need to compile the JavaScript into our JavaScript files. So we're going to jump over here and just compile that real quick. We'll do npm run dev. And we'll let that run. While that's running, that's going to basically create an app.js file for us that contains the new Laravel Echo instance that we've created. And so now let's go ahead and just put this into our views so we can test it. So we're going to go into our view file here. I am just going to close up a couple of these. And down here, right before the body, we'll add some script tags. And we'll bring in our app.js file. All right, and then while we're at it, let's also go through and create a script tag where we can set up Laravel Echo. So we should have access to Laravel Echo here as just the Echo global, and we're going to connect on a channel. And you know what I just realized is that let's go back to our event real quick because I think we're using private channel here. We are. We're using private channel. So back on our event, let's just set it up to channel. So it's a public channel. You can see that up here. Just for this tutorial, I'm not going to mess with authentication, but you can normally just do authentication as you normally would inside of your routes file or whatever. Okay, so, or your routes folder, I mean. Okay, so echo channel just to get a public channel, and we're going to tell it to listen on our home channel. And we're going to listen for subscribe to our home channel, and then we're going to tell it to listen for the new message event. All right? And then when we get something from new message, we'll just tell it to log it to the console. So we're not going to do anything super crazy. We'll just tell it to log the event, okay? In fact, we'll just tell it to log event.message since we're going to just grab that message property. And that's it. That's all we need to do. That's it for Laravel Echo. We're bringing it in. Everything should work fine. I think we do need to bring in our meta tag because I think that's required. Okay, so I just wanted to bring in the CSRF token. I think that throws an error if you don't have that up there. In the past, I've experienced that. Perfect. So I'm going to come over here just to the console. And actually what we're going to do is I am going to throw this to the side. And what we're going to do is we are going to basically watch our statistics here. We'll watch the events come in on this side, and we should be able to see the console logging our events on this side. And then the last thing we need is just in our terminal, we'll run the we'll actually run the command. So let's go ahead and get back into Tinker. And you can see here that we have something subscribed. So it says subscribed and occupied on the home channel, and that's our new element. If we actually click here and refresh, you can see that we vacate the channel, disconnect the channel, and then you can see the reconnection because we refreshed, okay? So you see all of that data here, which is really, really cool. All right, now this is just from our events, so ignore that. Now let's go ahead and trigger that. So we're gonna say event again. In fact, can we just duplicate? Yeah, there we go. We can duplicate it. So I'm gonna send the message hello world by triggering that event again. We should see it down here, and we'll see it show up in our console, basically all simultaneously. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And you can see we got our new home, on the home channel, we got a new app event, and we got our hello world message, okay? So you can see that it works here. Just show it again. And there you go. You can see it popping in. You can see it showing up here and, of course, down there. So everything just works like a charm. All right, so that's basically it. That's all you need to do to get started with Laravel WebSockets Server. You can host this yourself on your, right inside of your Laravel project. So it's super easy to run. The only thing you really need to do is just make sure you have once you deploy the application, that you have supervisor watching that PHP artisan WebSocket serve command, just so that it keeps running. But otherwise, you can run your own basically little pusher server yourself. It's self-hosted. Now, one thing I will say about security, about performance, is this performs actually very, very well. I'm going to link down the description a blog post from the creator of this package, and he tested this package on a $5 DigitalOcean droplet, so a little $5 VPS, and on a $5 VPS, he was able to maintain 15,000 concurrent channels or concurrent connections. 15,000 concurrent connections off of a $5 virtual private server. So that's really, really powerful. just for comparison, if we take a look at like what Pusher, if we take a look at Pusher here and just compare, now there's a lot of benefits to Pusher. Lots of benefits. The fact that it's managed and maintained, there are a lot of benefits. And if I were running definitely a large enough application, I would still consider using a service like Pusher, just because you know it's going to run and be up and running very, very quickly. But just to put it in perspective as far as pricing goes, if we take a look here, obviously on the free plan you get 100 max connections, and then on the paid plan you can see that it goes from $50 up to $500 a month, and the number of concurrent connections is what basically goes up. So on the $500 a month plan, $500 a month, you get 10,000 connections. And according to this blog post from the developer, he says you can get 15,000 connections from a $5 private server. Okay, so that's really, really powerful. He said on a $20 server, you can get up to 50,000 concurrent connections. So that's really, really powerful. You do have to maintain it, but again, it runs like a normal Laravel application. So hopefully you're already used to maintaining those and serving that information. So that's a really, really awesome option. I think this is going to change it for a lot of people. A lot of people that previously weren't able to add real-time notifications and real-time WebSockets to their applications are now going to be able to do it. And I think that's a really cool opportunity. Now, again, don't ignore Pusher. I think Pusher is a great option for a lot of people. And honestly, if I were scaling up large enough, there's some value to having what Pusher provides, okay? But this is just another really good alternative to consider, being able to host it yourself, okay? And it's something that you guys have been requesting. So hopefully you guys found that very interesting. Now, if you did get lost anywhere along the way in this video today, I do recommend you go down to the description and take a look at my Laravel WebSockets tutorial. It's a five-part series. It's all free. It's here on YouTube, and you can watch it. I think it's about an hour of content if you watch it like front to back all the way through. And that goes into a lot of detail about a lot of the stuff that I kind of just skimmed past here. How to set up Echo, all the parts of, the server side part, the client side part, and all that kind of stuff. We also cover private channels and presence channels. So it goes more into that, whereas we just worked with public channels here today. Okay, so there's a lot there. If you're interested in learning more about Laravel WebSockets, be sure to check out that tutorial series down there. Completely free here on YouTube. You can take a look at it. So I'll link that down in the description. And that's it. That's all you guys need to know. Now, if you are interested in configuring or customizing your server, in the next video, what I'm going to do is just kind of go through those customization settings inside of our config/WebSockets configuration file. Just kind of explain what those are and how you can customize your application depending on your needs. So if that's something that's interesting to you, check out that video. That should only be 5 or 8 minutes, so it shouldn't be too long. But otherwise, if you don't need that, no worries. You guys know how to set up a WebSockets server now and how to connect with it through Laravel Echo. So really cool stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.